wash your private part and make wudu. And according to the version of Muslim, perform wudu and sprinkle water over your genitals. This hadith of the Prophet ﷺ is on the authority of, it has been reported sometimes on the authority of Ali ibn Abi Talib, and in other versions it has been reported by al-Miqdad ibn al-Aswad. The basic story is that the Miqdad was delegated by Ali ibn Abi Talib because this is a critical issue, and Ali didn't like actually to discuss it with the Prophet ﷺ directly, because he is his son-in-law. So Ali ibn Abi Talib sent al-Miqdad to inquire about the legal ruling on this issue, and he returned back to answer Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu ta'ala anhu. First of all, I would like to define some terms which have been used in this hadith. The first one is madhi. It is pronounced as madhi and madhi and midhay. These are the three way of how the Arabs used to pronounce this term: madhi or madhi or midhay. And it is basically refer to an emotional discharge that flows upon having a sexual desire. And it's for both male and female. There is another term which is used. It's called wadi. And wadi is a discharge or a flow. It flows actually because of carrying something. And the scholars mention that it has the same ruling as madhi. فاستحييت, the word استحييت, haya is defined as a sense of bashfulness that causes a person to avoid foul conduct. This is a legal definition of haya. Haya cannot be translated as shyness. Some people translate it in English in that way. So you need to be very cautious in translating those terms, which they don't have actually equivalent in Arabic language, in English language. So haya is a very comprehensive, and it may be translated as modesty. The Prophet ﷺ says, yaghsil. What is the meaning of yaghsil? There is a difference between some versions mention the word yaghsil, which means wash, and washing in this case to overflow the part to be washed with water. And according to other version of the hadith is wandah. What is the meaning of wandah? Wandah means to sprinkle water, and this is different from overflowing washing. It's not complete washing, it's just spreading water on the part to be washed. So there are two actually versions, and here the Prophet ﷺ referred to the how does he actually purify himself after this discharge. Anyhow, let's actually move to the legal rulings which may be derived from this hadith. And the Prophet ﷺ saying, I was a man who got frequent emotional discharges or earthral discharges. Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu ta'ala anhu described himself as having frequent discharges. And according to the version of Imam Ahmad and Abu Dawood, he said, I used to take a bath until my back cracked because of frequent washing. I mentioned it to the Prophet ﷺ, but this was mentioned to him by someone else, and the Messenger ﷺ do not do so, which means the Prophet ﷺ prohibited him of washing himself frequently. When you find this, wash your penis and perform ablution as you do for prayers. But when you have a seminal emission, you should take a bath. So some scholars regard it as a disease and gave the ruling based on this. So here, the scholars, we have a literal meaning, and this sentence of the hadith is open for interpretation. Can anybody give me the two meanings, the two possible meanings of this phrase? I was a man who got frequent emotional discharges. It may be interpreted to mean that Ali ibn Abi Talib suffered from a disease which caused him to have these emotional discharges all the time, right? And it's possible that he doesn't have a disease and this is normal. It's something which is normal. But Ali ibn Abi Talib used to have these frequent emotional discharges. Am I right? Do we have two interpretations which seem palatable in this case? Okay. So based on that, the scholars differed on the meaning that may be derived from this statement. Some of them, they attached this ruling to a case of a person who has a disease. We have the case of a disease of a person who have continency, which means that he has continuous bleeding, or he has a continuous urinating, or a woman who had bleeding, irregular bleeding, which is called istihada. So the scholar said that if a person has this disease, so he has a different file to discuss. You understand what I'm saying? So in this case, if we base our ruling on the issue that it is a disease, so if a person had this disease, he has certain procedures to follow. Can anybody tell me about those procedures? You have certain procedures for a person who has irregular a disease, a case like irregular bleeding all the time or most of the time. There are some procedures to follow. Those procedures are, number one, they make wudu per prayer time. Number two, they make wudu immediately before the prayer time. Number three, it's only one wudu for one prayer and its subsequent additional supererogatory rak'ats. So you cannot make one wudu for Asr and Maghrib. Number four, this person is not regarded as fully and completely ritually pure. You understand what I'm saying? He did not remove the state of hadith or the state of ritual impurity, right? And he should actually take procedures, other procedures for not having any drops in the masjid, etc. So this is the case of a disease. If it is not the case of a disease, so what he is supposed to do is only supposed to do what? To just make wudu and to wash the part which has been sullied or polluted by this discharge. And this is the case as we are going to explain. So which one? So we have here, according to our analysis of this text, we have a zahir and we have a ta'weel. So let me explain it for you. We have an explicit meaning, zahir nas, and we have an interpretation. Which one is zahir? What is the primary meaning that we assume here? We assume that he doesn't have a disease, right? Why? Because the word disease is not mentioned. So according to the pronounced meaning of the text, we say that it is, as is, he doesn't have a disease. So we should actually refer to this, we stick to the zahir, to the explicit meaning of the text, and we cannot migrate to any secondary interpretation unless what? Can anybody answer? Unless we have a strong proof that qarina, clue, that this clue in the text itself or in another text, in another version of the hadith to provide that the Ali ibn Abi Talib had this disease. You understand this? Is it clear? Okay. So this is the first point from this hadith. The second point, the Prophet ﷺ has been reported saying, or Ali ibn Abi Talib was said, I was too embarrassed to ask the Messenger ﷺ about it due to my being his son-in-law. This statement, my brothers and sisters, refer to an adab, to a code of behavior, to an item which most of us, subhanallah, most of the Muslims, they miss, which is the sense of haya, the sense of modesty. So this is usually happens. So Ali ibn Abi Talib had a very close relation to the Prophet ﷺ. He felt embarrassed because he's married to Fatima radiallahu ta'ala anha, and it was not appropriate to raise this issue in front of everybody in the masjid, so the people would actually think about Fatima and about him. So Ibn Daqiq al-Eid maintained that this hadith refers to the significance of showing modesty by avoiding situations that may cause embarrassment. Don't put yourself in situations where you seem be criticized in front of others. Don't put yourself in a critical situation. Al-haya'u la ya'ti illa bi khair. Haya is a sense of bashfulness that makes the soul avoid full conduct, and it always brings up what is the best. It brings up the best. So it is basically very important to have this haya when we discuss some critical issues, some private affairs. Don't reveal it in front of everybody. Try to make it secret as much as possible. But is it actually encouraged to practice haya when you are in need to ask about something which is very important about your life, about your religion? Like a sister, for example, she has certain problems. She has a problem with regard to her period. Is it possible that she discuss it in front of a alim or a scholar? Or it is preferably for sure that she discuss it with a female scholar. But if it is not available in the community, if it's not possible, and she doesn't have a husband who can go and ask on her behalf, so what should she do in this case? She can actually ask these questions based on the hadith of Salama radiallahu ta'ala anha, when she came to the Prophet ﷺ, and she, Sulaym, the hadith of Sulaym, when the woman came and she started asking the Prophet ﷺ about certain issues, and Aisha became very modest and she covered her face. But the Prophet ﷺ listened to her question and he answered her question. So haya is not practiced in two situations. Number one, in asking about an issue that you don't know, whether it is critical or not in knowledge, it's not haya to say I didn't understand it. It's not haya that you ask a question. Number two, it's not haya when you see something wrong in front of you and you feel shy that you don't like actually to address it. No, this is not haya, because you are afraid of the art of respecting somebody, or somebody he has power and authority, so you cannot approach him. You are afraid to approach him. No, لا يمنعن أحدكم مخافة الناس أن يقول بالحق. So don't be afraid when you see something wrong that you address it in front of that person and you discuss it freely without having this sense of modesty. This is not recommended to practice modesty in this issue. But anyhow, this hadith, subhanAllah, refers us to one of the of one of what you can call delicate adab of the Sahaba. So we asked al-Miqdad ibn al-Aswad to ask on his behalf. So the scholars concluded that one may delegate another person to raise a question on his behalf if he has an excuse, such as being absent from a session, or, for example, and Bukhari mentioned this report of Ali ibn Abi Talib under the title on someone who is too shy to ask and requests someone else to inquire on his behalf. So in fact, a person can inquire and he can delegate another person to ask on his behalf. The Prophet ﷺ said, let him wash his private part. So the scholars, why does he wash his private part? The scholars concluded two basic things from this. Let him wash his private part. Can I ask you a question, which is I go deeper into the interpretation of the texts of hadith, because I should train you how we deduce the meanings from the hadith. My brothers and sisters, what is the meaning of let him wash his private part? What is the literal meaning? What is the literal meaning? The literal meaning is very known. It's known for everybody. The Prophet ﷺ asked Ali ibn Abi Talib to wash his private parts, right? Is it the literal meaning? Is it the pronounced meaning that we take direct from the text? Okay. But you understand what I'm saying? My brothers and sisters, follow up. It's a command to wash his private part. Is there any other meanings that may be concluded by sequence, by consequence? Is there other meanings that may be concluded by consequence? Washing his undergarments too. Perfect. What else? Ya Sheikh Abu Abdullah. By consequence, we conclude that this discharge is pure or impure. It's najis. That's why, but it's not direct conclusion from the text, it's by consequence. You understand? It's by consequence. This is a means of dalalat, of how, it's not mafhum. It's not called mafhum, because mafhum means that the text is silent about it. It's not mafhum. It's actually related to what we can call, it may be ishara or whatever. But anyhow, we can discuss it in usul fiqh. But anyhow, by consequence, if the Prophet ﷺ asked him to wash his private parts, number one, this discharge is impure, and number two, it invalidates wudu, right? It invalidates wudu. So the scholars concluded from this statement that the Prophet ﷺ commanded him to wash his private part, so they concluded three meanings from this statement. Number one, that in order to purify a person after having this charge, one has to wash his private parts. Number two, this discharge is impure. Number three, what else? It invalidates ablution. It invalidates ablution. So a person have this discharge, he has to make ablution again. This is the conclusion here. Another question which is mentioned, or it is maybe asked here, because it invalidates ablution, it makes sense. Can anybody answer, Abu Abdullah? Can anybody answer, Abu Abdullah? We have, by reading the other ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ, we can ask ourselves this question. We have a general rule that everything that exits from anything which exits from the private parts, it actually invalidates ablution, right? Right or wrong? Anything which exits from this part, especially, that's why the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that it's najis, and number two, for sure, it exits from this place. So this is the two reasons that we conclude that it invalidates ablution. Okay, and number three, the Prophet ﷺ asked him to wash his private parts, and this is based on the concept that when washing the private parts, a person has to make the wudu by consequence. Okay. So the other question is raised. The Prophet ﷺ says, yaghsil, wash. So the other question is also raised. Is it permissible to remove the madhi and wadi by the pimples? You know that the Prophet ﷺ gave us a concession. It's a rukhsa, a concession on removing, you know, the general rule, the default rule is that a person should remove any dirt or any filth from his body, right or wrong? This is a default rule, right or wrong? Right. Okay, when a person washes himself, when a person removes this by pebbles, is there something remaining? For sure, there's something remaining. So the default rule is that we have to remove something. So the Sharia provide us by using pebbles, napkins, etc. This is a rukhsa or it's a azima. It's a concession or it's an ordinance. It's an ordinance or it's a concession. You can answer. It's a rukhsa. Basically, why? Because there's something remaining in the body, but the Sharia gave us the concession of doing this. So that problem here, that it comes again. Does the rukhsa is restricted or it's general? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows you to shorten prayers when you are traveling a certain distance or to cover a certain distance, can you extend it for other reasons too, which are not mentioned in that place or in that context? No, you cannot. You cannot. Like, for example, if you have a difficult work, can you extend the ruling? I mean that the rukhsa is restricted to a reason. If you have this reason, so you practice the rukhsa, right? You cannot practice analogy. You cannot make what you can analogical deduction, analogy, qiyas, to extend the ruling of a rukhsa to other cases. You understand what I'm saying? Like, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for instance, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed us to break fasting when we are in a journey, right? Or in a trip, which is a distance of 84 or 85 kilometers. You understand what I'm saying? I can say, Salman, brother Salman, you work in bakery. It's very hard, intensive, it's hard working. You can break your fasting, Salman? No, why? Because the rukhsa is restricted to those certain categories that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned. You understand what I'm saying? So this is the rukhsa, it's not extended according to analogical deduction. You got this concept? This is a case when we are talking about using pebbles. So is it removable through pebbles or not? Here it comes, you understand what I'm saying? So here it comes how you deal with the rukhsa. The rukhsa that Allah, the Prophet ﷺ allowed us to use the pebbles for removing urine and stool. You understand what I'm saying? But it's not, he did not extend this ruling to the madhi and wadi. You got this concept? So if a person had this problem, it should be washed by water because we refer to the default rule and we cannot remove it by napkins. You cannot remove it by other things. You have, if you remove it by napkins, you have later to sprinkle water or to wash it with water. You got this meaning? You got this? But it's difficult. Everybody understands? Everybody understands well? Okay. The Prophet ﷺ said, sprinkle water over your private parts. This is another version. According to the version of Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ was reported to have commanded Ali to just sprinkle his private parts. And the scholars explain the imperative in farjak to mean wash your private part. So we have two words which have been used by the scholars. Which are those two terms? Two terms have been mentioned in the different versions of the hadith. Who can remind me? Two words which were included in the command to Ali ibn Abi Talib. Sometimes the Prophet ﷺ, in one case, the Prophet ﷺ commanded him to do what? To wash. And in the other way, in the other hadith, the Prophet ﷺ is in nadh and ghusl. Exactly. So which one we have to choose, my brothers and sisters? Sprinkle or wash? Wash or sprinkle? Wash your private part, they based. Those who said that they based their view on the other reports of the hadith which indicate the madhi is impure and the rule of washing impurities is to fully wash them with water. So the scholars is, we have two meanings here. We have which one is mutlaq and which one is muqayyad. Which is one is absolute and which one is restricting the meaning. Huh? Nadh or ghusl. Which one? Which one is muqayyad and which one is mutlaq? Sprinkle is restricted. Sprinkle, yes. That's why the scholars disagreed on this issue. Those who regarded the sprinkling, it may be a rukhsa that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, because based on that, the scholars who said that the sprinkling, this is a clue to prove that this discharge is not impure. And the Prophet ﷺ just let him to just sprinkle it with water. That's why they concluded that's not, it's pure, there is no problem about it. And the other who said that's wash, they regarded actually washing as a restricting, because it's more, it's demanding more. And this is, I think, the correct view regarding this, because Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, they, according to the massive majority of the Muslim scholars, they hamlul mutlaq ala al-muqayyad, when there is a hadith which is absolute in its terms, and it's another text which is restricting its meaning, so they actually give priority to the restricting, not to the absolute. You understand what I'm saying? And there is a disagreement among scholars, the Hanafi and the majority, two different ways. You got it. As I mentioned to you, our discussion is basically based on how the scholars did use the rulings. And this is the reason that we dive deep into what you can call practical and theoretical anatomy of the text. You got it? Okay. Does it require a ritual intention? Does it require a ritual intention that you have to say, I intend to purify myself of doing this? No. There is ikhtilaf, but the massive majority of scholars said no, because you refer back to the default rule when we remove najasa. Okay, so it depends, ikhtilaf on what? If we regard that nadh is a concession, so a person needs to make intention in this case. You understand what I'm saying? Because it's irrational. But if it is ghusl, it's washing, so the scholar said that it doesn't need intention. Why? Do you have to get intention when you remove something filthy on your clothes? Do you have to get intention when you are removing najasa? Should you have any intention when you are removing najasa from your body in general? No, you don't have to get intention. Because why? Because intention is intended, is made actually basically to differentiate between a habit and an act of worship. It's not an act of worship that you have to remove najasat. It's not an act of worship in this case. It's a cleanliness. It's for the sake reason of cleanliness, having yourself clean. You understand? So when you wash your plate, when you wash your utensil after being licked by a dog, do you have to wash it? No, you don't have to wash it. You don't have to intend to wash it. You understand what I'm saying? So this is a general rule, and this is the meaning which is supported by the massive majority of. Okay, now we come back to the question which was raised by Abu Abdullah. He said, why it is invalidator of wudu? Now we have another contextual proof in the text itself. The Prophet ﷺ commanded him to do wudu. He said, do ablution. So the Prophet ﷺ instructed Ali to make ablution about this discharge of madhi. And based on that, the majority of scholars, including the Hanafis, Malikis, Shafi'is, and Hanbalis, they concluded that discharge of madhi is one of the invalidators of ablution. Got it now, Abu Abdullah? Okay. What about when, another question is by Salman, what about when one intends to make what was haram, for him halal through this washing? Okay, Salman is asking a very good question. Can anybody answer this question? Huh? About when he intends to make something haram. For him it is halal through this washing. If he cannot make nadh, why he does not make nadh? Because nadh is a concession. You understand what I'm saying? And if it is concession, we have a general rule that concessions or rukhas cannot be given in acts of disobedience. When you are disobeying Allah, when you are traveling, Salman, we are traveling from Sydney to, you are traveling to Melbourne to kill somebody. Can you shorten the prayer then? You cannot shorten the prayer then. Why? Because الرخص لا تناط بالمعاصي. Concessions cannot be enacted when you do acts of disobedience. When you disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you cannot take his concessions, the permissions that he has given to you, to just fight against him subhanahu wa ta'ala. Understand this now? Okay. So from where did we get it? From the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, فَمَنْ اضْطُرَّ فِي مَخْمَصَةٍ غَيْرَ مُتَجَانِفٍ لِإِثْمٍ غَيْرَ مُتَجَانِفٍ لِإِثْمٍ. And Allah also said in the Quran, غَيْرَ بَاغٍ وَلَا عَادٍ. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed the people to eat from the carcass or from the dead body of the meat, the flesh of a dead animal, he said, or carrion, whatever, he said, without transgressing limits. So when a person is in case of transgression, in case of a sin, he's not actually allowed to take the concessions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the first hadith of today. The second hadith is the hadith of Abbad ibn Tamim. If you have any questions regarding the first hadith, please don't hesitate, inshallah. Yes, go ahead, Abu Abdullah. Abu Abdullah is saying, does the sprinkle indicate the najasa is wusta, like the urine of a baby, a boy who doesn't desire food? I think nobody said that. Nobody said that among scholars, as far as I know. But those who said that is sprinkle, it indicates that just in case the madhi has been diluted with some urine or whatever. So in this case, it is a precaution. And they base their view on another hadith of the Prophet, which is reported in Muwatta Imam Malik. When a person has a sense of doubt on certain types of najasa, you can just sprinkle it with water. Okay? But it's not directly discussed by the scholars, the early scholars, in this context, in classifying the najasa into mughallawa, into wusta, and also into mukhaffafa. They did not discuss it in the real. Okay. Another hadith is the hadith of Abbad ibn Tamim, عن عباد ibn تميم عن عبد الله بن زيد بن عاصم المازني رضي الله عنه قال: شكي إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم الرجل يخيل إليه أنه يجد الشيء في الصلاة فقال لا ينصرف حتى يسمع صوتا أو يجد ريحا. It's related from Ammad ibn Tamim from Abdullah ibn Zayd ibn Asim al-Mazini that he said, a complaint was made to the Prophet ﷺ about a man who sensed something that he felt his ablution was nullified during prayer. He said he should not leave the prayer until he hears a sound or smells something. This hadith of the Prophet ﷺ is very important because it discusses one of the legal maxims which has been frequently discussed by the scholars. I will try to actually finish this hadith as much as I can, because now the Asr has been announced in Medina. So I may have maybe 10 minutes until the Iqam, and then I jump to the masjid close to the house. So certainly this legal maxim is certainty is not overruled by doubt. Certainty is not overruled by doubt. Al-yaqeen la yuzalu bish-shakk. أو بالظن. اليقين لا يزال بالظن أو بالشك. Certainty is not overruled by doubt. And this is one of the 5 most comprehensive legal maxims of fiqh. And the above hadith provides an evidence for this legal maxim. Although scholars are unanimous that this is an approved legal maxim of Sharia, they differed in its ramifications, how it is applied, how it's ramified in examples. But basically, we can say when a person in a state of, this is a type of istishab al-asl that we will discuss inshallah also, presumption of continuity. When you practice something for sure, as Sister Shayma mentioned, that it is al-yaqeen la yazulu bish-shak. When you are sure and certain about something, this certainty remains until it is nullified by another state of certainty. Abu Abdullah, have you made wudu? Shabaz, did you make wudu? Have you made wudu? Yes. We cannot say that brother Abu Abdullah has already nullified his wudu now, until he hears a sound, something, or smells something, which means that he is sure 100% that he invalidated his ablution. Okay, so this is a basic rule. It's ramified in a lot of issues. If you finish your prayer, brother Abu Abdullah, did you finish Isha? Have you already finished the Isha? Okay, the shaitan comes to you and says, okay, you missed the Fatiha, ya akhi. You missed the Fatiha. During your prayer, you have to make it up again. Can you make it up again? Abu Abdullah, you make it? No, why? Because you have already finished your prayer, making sure that you made it okay. So this certainty cannot be nullified by any state of other. If you are in a state of purity, you cannot nullify it by saying or believing that you have just nullified your wudu. This is the case when you are in prayer. But if you are in prayer and you made sure that you missed the Fatiha, what should you do? Brother Muhammad Kaput, you have missed the Fatiha in the prayer in the Salat al-Isha because you had some emergency. So you have actually were confused and you forgot to make Fatiha at all. So you made ruku' without reciting al-Fatiha. What should you do, Sheikh Muhammad? And you remember during your prayer, what should you do? In this case, you have to make another rak'ah. You have to add another rak'ah because you missed one rukun. You are in the middle of your prayer and you missed al-Fatiha, you missed the ruku'. And you make sure that you missed the ruku' now. You are still in prayer. So you have, in this case, to make up another rak'ah. Also, it is ramified in the case of doubt. If a person doubts, he doesn't know how many rak'ahs that he made. Brother Abu Abdullah, he prayed Maghrib and he is doubting. Is it 2 rak'ahs or 3 rak'ahs? I'm in doubt. Okay, sometimes he says, I made it 3 and sometimes I made it 2. What should he do in this case? He will refer to the state of certainty. Okay, which is case of certainty? You are sure 100% that you made 2. Are you sure that you made it 3? No, you are not sure. So according to the hadith of the Prophet فَلْيَبْنِي عَلَى مَسْتَيْقَنْ, you should base yourself on what you are assured about. This is very important, and this is called the presumption of continuity. The report provides an evidence for this case with a rational proof of Sharia, which is employed in the absence of other indications in Quran, Hadith, Ijma' or analogy. And istishab is held as valid in the Shafi'i school of law and the Hanbalis and the Zahiris also. And it technically means, it is defined as a continuation of that which is proven and the negation of that which has not existed. I will leave it for you, inshallah, for reading and for concentration. I have to leave right now, inshallah. and I will discuss with the brother brother Muhammad, inshallah. I already discussed with him about the quiz on the first 25 hadiths. He will, inshallah, inform you on the WhatsApp group. Please, if you have any other questions regarding the last hadith that I have mentioned, don't hesitate, inshallah, to raise.
inshallah. أحسن الله عليكم شيخنا.
حفظكم الله وبارك الله فيكم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله.